Imagine this, you live in a country, your neighbors are your friends, your children play together in the street, and you share the same shops, the same cafes, the same life. You go on vacation together, you celebrate holidays together, your kids go to the same school, you argue about football, you share meals, you know each other's families by name, and then, within a few years, it's all gone. Your neighbors are suddenly your enemies, the street you grew up on lies in ruins, and the country you were born in no longer exists. This is not a made-up story. This is not a movie. This is what happened to millions of real people in Yugoslavia, a country that collapsed before the eyes of the world in the 1990s, resulting in one of the bloodiest wars in European history since World War II. And the most bizarre part, most people know almost nothing about it. It happened just 30 years ago in Europe, on the same continent where people were booking summer holidays and watching the World Cup. And yet it feels like a forgotten chapter of history that nobody talks about. Welcome to Mielmobiel. Today we dive deep into the story of the country that destroyed itself. To understand why Yugoslavia fell, you first need to understand what it was, because Yugoslavia was not a normal country. Yugoslavia literally means land of the South Slavs. It was founded after the First World War in 1918 and consisted of a patchwork of peoples, cultures, and religions all forced together within one set of borders. Serbs, Croats, Slovenes, Bosniaks, Macedonians, Montenegrins, they were all thrown together into one country, 6 republics, 2 alphabets, 3 major religions, and dozens of ethnic groups with their own histories, grievances, and identities. The Serbs were largely Orthodox Christian, the Croats Catholic, the Bosniaks Muslim, and they all had their own language, their own traditions, their own sense of who they were and where they belonged. On paper, Yugoslavia looked like a bold experiment. Can people with such different backgrounds truly live together as one nation? For a while, the answer seemed to be yes. After the Second World War, one man came to power who held all of this together, Josip Broz Tito. He was a communist leader, but not like the Soviet Union. He played it smart. He kept Yugoslavia neutral between East and West during the Cold War, raised money from both sides, and suppressed nationalism with an iron fist. Under Tito, you were not allowed to say you were Serbian or Croatian above all else. You were Yugoslav, period. Anyone who pushed nationalist ideas too hard risked prison, and it worked. For decades, people lived together peacefully. Mixed marriages were completely normal. A Serb marrying a Croat, a Bosniak falling in love with a Slovene. The economy grew. Yugoslavia was considered one of the more open communist countries in the world. But underneath the surface, old wounds never truly healed. Resentment suppressed but never resolved, and the moment Tito died, all of that came rushing back. In 1980, Tito died. He was 87 years old, and with him died the one force that had held Yugoslavia together. Without Tito, Yugoslavia had no strong leader. A rotating presidency took over, clumsy and ineffective. The economy collapsed. Unemployment soared. Families struggled. People were angry and scared. Easy targets for politicians with simple answers, and those politicians appeared. The most dangerous of them was Slobodan Milosevic, a Serbian politician who rose to prominence in the late 1980s with one clear and powerful message: the Serbs are being oppressed, and I am going to change that. He gave passionate speeches. He told crowds that Serbia had sacrificed the most for Yugoslavia and received the least, that it was time to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. The crowds went wild. People who had felt powerless suddenly had a leader who spoke to their fears. But in the other republics, people watched with growing alarm, because if Serbia wanted to dominate Yugoslavia, what did that mean for everyone else? For the Croats, for the Slovenes, for the Bosniaks? The answer for many of them was painfully clear. They wanted out. Independence movements grew rapidly across the country. If Yugoslavia was going to become a Serbian project, they wanted no part of it. In June 1991, Slovenia and Croatia both declared independence on the same day. The Yugoslav wars had officially begun, and what followed would traumatize an entire generation. In 1992, Bosnia and Herzegovina also declared independence, and this is where the conflict became a catastrophe on a scale that shocked the entire world and left a permanent scar on European history. Bosnia was the most ethnically mixed part of Yugoslavia. Bosniak Muslims, Serbs, and Croats had lived side by side for generations. In the same cities, on the same streets, sometimes in the same apartment buildings. They were colleagues, friends, neighbors, In many cases, they were family. When the war broke out, all of that was torn apart almost overnight. Bosnian Serb forces, heavily armed and backed by the Serbian military, launched a systematic campaign across the country. Their goal was brutal and simple: to create ethnically pure territories by driving out or eliminating everyone who did not belong to their group. Villages were burned, families separated, thousands imprisoned in camps under horrific conditions. Scenes the world thought belonged to World War II were now playing out in Europe, just 2 hours from Paris or Berlin. The capital Sarajevo was besieged, not for a few days, not for a few weeks, but for 1,425 days, nearly 4 full years. It became the longest siege of a capital city in the entire history of modern warfare. Residents were trapped. Snipers in the surrounding hills shot at anyone who moved in the streets below. Men, women, children, people risked their lives daily just to find water or food. The sound of shelling became the soundtrack of daily life, and the world watched and did nothing at all. And then there was Srebrenica. In July 1995, Bosnian Serb forces under the command of General Ratko Mladic marched into the town of Srebrenica. The United Nations had officially declared it a safe zone, a protected area where civilians could find refuge from the violence. Dutch UN peacekeepers were stationed there specifically to protect the population. But when Mladic's forces arrived, the peacekeepers stepped aside, outnumbered, outgunned, no orders to resist. Bosnian Serb soldiers separated the men and boys from the women. The women were bussed away. The men and boys, some as young as 12, some as old as 70, were taken to fields and warehouses, and there they were executed, shot one by one, or in groups, more than 8,000 human beings. Fathers, sons, brothers, grandfathers, teenagers who had barely started their lives. The killings were systematic and organized. Afterwards, their bodies were buried in mass graves. Then, when investigators began closing in, the graves were secretly dug up and the remains scattered across multiple locations to hide the evidence. It took forensic investigators years to identify the victims. Some families waited decades to find out the fate of their loved ones. Srebrenica was the worst mass murder in Europe since the Holocaust, later officially recognized as genocide. Ratko Mladic was arrested in 2011, convicted in 2017, and died in prison. By 1995, NATO finally intervened with airstrikes. Peace agreements were signed. Yugoslavia was gone forever, broken into 7 nations, some still struggling with the past today. More than 130,000 people killed, over 2 million displaced, cities destroyed, generations traumatized. What can we learn? That peace is never permanent, that neighbors can become enemies overnight when fear is weaponized, and leaders choose power over people. Yugoslavia thought it was immune. The warning signs were there. And still, it happened. This was the story of Yugoslavia, a country built on a dream, destroyed by a nightmare. Subscribe to Mielmobiel. More forgotten stories are coming.